Hi, today we're going to be working in the technique is probably the most well-known form of Chinese cooking. It's called stir fry. Um, so you'll be watching what I'm doing, but basically what the stir fry means, you're turning your fire up very high, getting your pot very hot with oil, and then adding your ingredients, because what you want to do is to cook fast so that the vegetables stay crispy and while they cook, and the color still remains true, so that when we finish we have multicolored ingredients, but they won't look mushy and colorless, we hope. Okay, today we're going to make pepper steak. We're going to be using peppers, a couple of different colors, tomatoes, celery, garlic. Those are all ingredients you know. But I want to introduce you to some of the extra Chinese ingredient. This is ginger. Now, when I buy ginger, I buy a big piece of it, break it into pieces, cover it with aluminum foil, and put it in the freezer. Now, it's usually big bulbs of it, and the best thing to do with your ginger is keep it in the freezer, and it'll last forever as long as you keep it frozen. Now, the way to clean it, you can just use a spoon and scrape off the outside covering. You can let it defrost a little bit. I just took it straight out of the freezer. You may have to let it defrost a little so that you can whack off a chunk of the ginger. Okay, in fact, I'm going to let it sit a little bit so that it'll be easier to cut the ginger. Now, when I buy a big piece of ginger, it'll last forever. So, the meat that we're going to be working with is flank steak. And if you'll notice, all of the grain goes this way. And when we do Chinese cooking, what we're trying to do, I'm just going to take some of this flank steak, cut it off. If it has any fat on it, I'll take it off, but it doesn't need it. The thing about flank steak is that you never have much of a waste. There's a little bit of fat here, which you can cut off, or just leave it on for now, because I'm going to take this and put it right into the freezer and keep it for another dish. So there's very little waste on flank steak. Even though it is kind of expensive, you waste very little of the meat. So you want to take off the extra fat. But I'm not going to do that thoroughly right now. I'm just going to show you that you would get rid of that fat. Well, let me put this away here for now. Okay. I'm not going to measure it or weigh it. I'm just taking a piece of the flank steak and I'm going to cut it into thirds so that I have 3 sections, same width, And then we're going to slice at a diagonal pieces of meat. And what you're doing is you have your grain going this way, but we're cutting across it, and that means that when you chew it, it's not going to be stringy because you've got short fibers that we're slicing. So we put it into this. And they're about, say, 1/4 of an inch. Some people, if they have their flank steak frozen, when it's defrosted, slightly defrosted, they find it easier to cut. So if you wanted to, and you're taking it out of the freezer when it's half defrosted, you cut your meat. Now, we've got that much meat, but that doesn't quite look like enough meat for a whole dinner, so I'm going to cut off some more of the flank steak. Say, depends on how many people you're having for dinner. Cut it in thirds. After we get these sliced, we're going to add marinade. Okay, now that looks like plenty of meat, and we will be slicing our vegetables. But while the vegetables are being prepared, we're going to make some marinade here. I'm going to start with, in fact, I'll just chop up all of these. I'm taking 3 cloves of garlic. You can't go wrong adding more garlic. Okay. Now, I'm taking part of that and just putting it on there. I'm going to put the rest of that let's start with some sugar. So I'll measure it for you. I usually don't measure. I mean, I know when I cook, I don't have to measure, but for you, I'll measure. Okay. That's 1 tablespoon of sugar. That looks about right. Now to that, I'm going to add some cornstarch. Not quite a tablespoon, just and we're going to, this is Kikkoman soy sauce. I buy it by the quart size, 2 quart size, and then put it into my smaller container. Usually, okay, that's 1, 2, 3 tablespoons. Now, we're going to let this marinate while we prepare the other ingredients. And you could do this a couple of hours if you wanted to and let it just sit until you're ready to cook. So we'll just put that aside and let's talk about the vegetables. Our ginger is slightly defrosted. Let's see if we can. Okay. Now this piece of ginger is about the size of a quarter and almost a ½ inch. And I'm going to just chop it and add it to the remaining garlic. I'm going to put this back into the freezer. I'm just going to wrap this tightly and put it back in the freezer. And this is why when you buy a big piece of ginger, you will have it for a long time. It doesn't destroy the flavor to have it frozen. So I'll put this back in the freezer. Now you've probably heard of black beans. These are salted black beans. You buy them at a Chinese grocery store. They come in a plastic bag. So I can't tell you how they do it, but this is salt. It's that white that you see is salt. Now you can keep this. I take it out of the plastic bag, put it into a jar, and then I just stick it in my pantry, and whenever I want it, I use it. Now you can see all that, it's the salt in there. So if yours turns white because you don't use it very often, it doesn't matter. It's just salt. Now, that's a tablespoon of the black beans. And this is just rinsing the salt off. I think I have here. Do that, because all you're doing is just rinsing the excess salt off. Okay, now I'm going to add that to our chopped ginger and garlic. If you have a mortar and pestle, you can use a mortar and pestle to sort of grind it up. But what I'm going to do is this is what my parents did at home. This is their cleaver, and they would just Now, the thing about the black beans, I have seen black bean sauce at Wegmans. If you can't get to a Chinese grocery store, they have it. It's already mashed up, so you don't have to go through that step. We're going to, if we have enough time in this class, I'm going to show you how to use black beans to make a wonderful spare ribs and black bean sauce dish. So, now, I use black beans when I make pepper steak. But if you can't get black beans or ginger, you don't have to have it. You can just make it with soy sauce, garlic, sugar. It's better if you have these other ingredients. Okay, so we keep this. We've got our meat marinating. The purpose of the cornstarch, it'll give us a little bit of a crust when I stir fry the meat. Okay, now the next step in doing Chinese cooking is understanding the cutting technique for the vegetables. Now, you know Chinese eat with chopsticks. So, usually the dishes, when they come to the table, don't require a separate knife. I mean, everything is cut to size. So, but you try to keep your vegetables basically the same size. So, I clean these, cut each half into a third. Then I'm going to take, and I'm cutting them into triangles so that we have the shape. And they're basically the same bite size. So, thirds. Chinese food, the way they cut things are very important. I happen to have some other colored, little ones, so I'm just going to add them in because color is what gives a lot of the interest for the Chinese dishes. Color is just as important as the ingredients and the sauce. So we're putting in color. And as I said before, I could tell you only use three peppers or 4 peppers. But with Chinese cooking, if you want a bigger dish, just add more vegetables. Just you can add, if you have mushrooms, add mushrooms. You have a lot of tomatoes, add tomatoes. Okay, now, so we've got orange and green, and I'm going to add some celery, which I've cleaned. Now with the celery, again, we're talking about not cutting it across this way, but cutting it across at an angle. It'll be crunchier, it'll be less stringy this way when you're chewing. So okay. So it's important to get all of your ingredients prepared, because once you start cooking, the cooking is rather fast. So you won't have time to prepare vegetables or anything else. Once you start cooking, you got to keep going. Now I'm taking Now, all of these are crunchy, and the idea is that we're going to cook things according to how long we're going to add the ingredient that takes the longest to cook. So probably the green onion, the green peppers, and the celery are going to take the longest to cook. The last vegetable I will add will be the onion, because you want the onion to be really crunchy when you serve it. Now, you can do with these, we cut them in triangle. So when I cut these, I'm going to leave them so that you have when they fall apart when you're cooking, you're going to have big chunks. I don't want them too small. You can see not only are you adding color, but you're adding quantity. Actually, you've only got half of that onion, but I think it's plenty onion. The last thing we will add will be tomatoes, and those you just stir in. You do not cook them. You just stir them in, because they will fall apart. So let's just put these. And now these you want to keep in relatively large chunks. And you just add as many as you want. I mean, I could tell you only put in 3, but if it looks like you like a little bit more, this is what is going to add your color and juice for your gravy. And here again, there's sort of triangular shapes that we're going for. Okay, so now we have all of our ingredients ready. This will be added when I add the vegetables. One of the things that people have been liking, the Szechuan style of cooking. This is a hot chili sauce. Now, the traditional way of cooking this would just be with the ingredients that I currently have put together. But if you like a little spice, you might want to add, I always add a little bit because our family likes a little bit of spice. So if you like to add a little bit of spice to your cooking, you might want to put some of this in. But be careful because it's hot. Okay. The end of cooking, to thicken your gravy, we take just some cornstarch and add water to it. This creates a slurry. So you can get this. You just get that. Just mix it with a little bit of water. We will be adding that at the very end. I just remembered. This is sesame oil. It's a flavoring that you add at the end of the cooking. Yeah. So we'll be using that. Now, this has been sitting maybe a half an hour, and you can prepare it ahead of time, longer. The longer it cooks, the longer it sits, the more the flavor combines. Okay. Now, I use a wok because I actually just bought this. Before, I would just use a big frying pan, but I discovered this particular wok, which is an aniline pan. It's heavy and it's a non-stick. Most of the, if you have a traditional Chinese wok, it isn't non-stick. But new things come along, and I found that I really like this pot. So if you have a wok, use it. Otherwise, use a deep frying pan when you're doing your stir fry, because by the time we add all of these vegetables, you're going to have a big pot full. So we're going to start with this is just, what is this oil? Canola. Peanut oil is better, so if you have peanut oil, use that. I'm just going to put in 2 tablespoons of oil. And let me have this here. It's a good idea to have a pot of water there so you can add water. Now you're going to want to, here's the part about Chinese cooking. It is messy, and so you're going to have to get used to cleaning all around your stove. So you're starting out with your oil. You want your oil hot. Actually, that's a lot of oil, so I'm going to take some out. Maybe 1 tablespoon is plenty of oil. only put 2 tablespoons in, and a heck of a lot more came out. Lord have mercy. Okay, you just need a coating of oil. Remember, this particular pan is a non-stick. So, we're going to let that, we're going to be sure it's hot. Now, you don't want to use a metal utensil in a non-stick pan. So, wood or a non-stick. Okay, that's good and hot. Stir fry means you're going to hear it sizzle when I put it in, and I'm going to stir it quickly and only cook it maybe 2-3 minutes at the most. And I will be stirring it. You want quick brown. You get a quick sear. See that? That's what you want. The cornstarch gives you that sear. Now I'm going to take that. One thing about this pot, it's heavy. Can't lift it. Okay, now let's add that oil back that we took out. Where is it? We're going to get this ready to go. Now our pot is hot. I'm going to start adding these. Well, actually it's not rolling. And I'm going to add this to it. Now, you might need a little bit more oil. Here's another thing that I add. If you don't have quite enough flavor, you might want to add a little bit of chicken bouillon. got a quick sear. Now, if you feel like I should have added a little bit more peppers, I'm going to just add another quarter of the pepper. Because it looks like I could add more. So, there you go. Now, I told you that you might want to add a little bit of this sauce. So if you decide that you would like a little, just give it a little pinch. That'll give you an extra flavor. Let that cook a little bit. Then we're going to add next thing to add will be the onions after this cooks, maybe 5 minutes. Now while that's waiting, this meat, I'm going to add some cornstarch to the meat. And this becomes the basis of the gravy. That was about a tablespoon extra. But you can see the juice from the meat is already formed for your gravy. Huh? Smells great. Okay. Let's let this cook about another minute. So everything looks great. I'm going to add the onions. Those onions in there. You've got a real pot of vegetables in here now. Now the next, I'm going to add a little bit more water because you want a lot of gravy. Let that come up to a boil. You don't want to waste any of those black beans. You can see how the sides are hot. Okay. So I'm going to add the meat back into the vegetables, and on the very last we'll stir stir in see how this is starting to make the gravy? Now, let me have that slurry. Okay, we're going to put this in, and we're going to add the slurry. And the best way to do it so that you don't get it too thick all at once is to add a tablespoon at a time. Now we don't want it to be in here long because I don't want that meat to cook. Okay, that's it. Now your onions, your celery, your peppers are still a little bit are going to be crispy. There you are. I'm going to turn this off. I would take that and serve it, put it right into the serving plate. And the last bit of flavoring, I'm turning that off. Say about a tablespoon. There you are. Doesn't that look great? Stir fried, fast, delicious. You can use chicken, pork, shrimp. That's our basic stir fry with black bean sauce. And you see the little black beans in there. That's it, guys.